Hello and welcome to the action in the 2024 Candidates Tournament. This is a round 11 matchup. This duel between Alireza Firouzja with the white pieces, and he's rated 2760, versus Nejat Abasov with a 2632 rating. So this is round 11. Let's see what they do here. Before we begin, take a look at this accuracy rating. So a 98% accuracy rating by Firouzja versus 87.8 by his opponent. So only one inaccuracy in this game versus one for his opponent and three mistakes. So let's see what they are. And also a look here at the rating level in this game: 2950 for Firouzja versus 2550, 99.3 in the opening versus 99.3. So they were even in the opening, but the middle game basically decided it here: 97.3 versus 80.5. All right, let's take a look. So put on the analysis, and the game, it's a little out of the ordinary from some of the other games in the tournament. It begins with knight to f3, knight to f6, and then b3. So Firouzja, maybe taking his opponent into some lines that he's not as familiar with. So c5 is played, bishop to b2, lining up on the center and aiming at the king side. So now we have knight to c6, e3, and g6 here. So one strategy is when somebody fianchettos a bishop and it's aiming towards you, you can do that on the opposite end of the diagonal and kind of have those bishops contest this long square or long diagonal here and kind of fight for that diagonal. So anyway, continuing on, d4 is played, taking some space in the center here. And after capture, knight captures, and bishop to g7 is played, although the computer preferred an immediate capture of this knight here. So continuing on, bishop to e2, white is ready to castle, black castles, and so does white. So now the knight does capture in the center and the bishop recaptures. So this bishop has a nice long diagonal and is placed well in the center for the moment. Now we have d5, the best move in the position. And this gives black some space. And knight to d2, because he didn't want to block the path of his bishop by playing knight to c3. This knight also kind of helps control this e4 square to prevent the knight from jumping in there possibly. And the knight could help a push of the c or e pawns in the future, or even jump to f3 to help guard the king side. So now we have queen to d6. So the players are still developing their pieces. Now this move, the only inaccuracy played by Firouzja, and it looks like with this move, the game, it was even, but now this tilts it in black's favor. But what should black do here? It looks like e5, pushing the pawn in the center and attacking the bishop here. So before we go on, let's see what Firouzja should have done instead. By moving here, let's see, knight to f3 is what the computer prefers instead. So knight to f3 would prevent that e5 pawn push. So by going here, now this pawn cannot be pushed forward and attack the bishop there. So if knight to f3 was played, then bishop to f5, just continuation of development. So in the game, c4, the only inaccuracy by Firouzja, he attacks this valuable central pawn with his less valuable flank pawn. And now the game continues with a mistake by Abasov. So he should have pushed this pawn and driven this bishop back. So if we take a look at that, e5, the bishop should retreat back to b2, it looks like. And then, then rook to d8 here. So rook to d8. And at this point, knight to f3 could be played, rook to c1, or even h3 maybe, preventing pieces from jumping to g4 in the future. All right, so in the game, the mistake is made, rook to d8. So this tilts the balance in white's favor here. And now, how does Firouzja respond? Well, he captures this valuable pawn in the center with his less valuable flank pawn. Queen recaptures, which is the best move. And now we have bishop to f3, attacking the queen. So the queen steps over to f5, although the computer prefers this queen to b5 move, which would keep the game closer to even. So now the rook grabs the open file here, and then we have a knight retreat, which is the best move according to the computer. It unleashes this dark squared bishop, attacking the bishop in the center here. So now we have this move, rook to c5, attacking the queen. So the recommendation was bishop to c5. You're targeting this pawn here, which is interesting. So let's take a look at that. Hold on. Let me go back. Let's go back and take a look here. So bishop to c5. So that is what the computer recommended instead of the rook move. So that targets this pawn. Then what do you have? Queen to e5. And then queen up to e2. Okay. So that gives you an idea of what the computer recommends. But in the game, and that would give white a slight edge. So in the game, we had this move, targeting the queen. So another mistake is made because Firouzja is just putting the pressure on his opponent, and his opponent is starting to get stressed under this pressure and make mistakes here. So e5 attacks the bishop, but this pawn is pinned. The pawn is pinned to the queen by this rook. So let's see what the computer recommended. Instead of that move, e5, queen to e6 is the recommendation. So if you play queen to e6, well, now it looks like capturing the bishop here is best. Getting rid of this defender around black's king side here. And then the knight could jump off this back rank. This is not a very good square for a knight on g7, but it kind of plugs this hole, from any queen checks along this dark square diagonal. But it also gets that knight off the back rank, so I guess it's a little bit better there. Now, what is recommended? Queen to c1 to avoid, maybe attacks on this knight, which is pinned here. So we have a pin on the knight by the rook up there. All right, so back in the game, e5 was played, a mistake. Now, Alireza Firouzja plays a great move, knight to c4, developing this piece, adding pressure to this pawn. which is pinned to the queen. So now what? It looks like queen to e6 would be the best move, but this mistake is made. f6 here. And a mistake. So now it's saying knight to c7 would have been better. Knight, or wait a minute, is that accurate? Knight to c7? It says knight to c7 is best. Okay. Yeah, I guess you can't capture that. Well, you could capture that, but then the pawn would capture your bishop. So after that move, you have what? Knight takes e5. Then knight to e6 is recommended as best. So targeting that bishop. Then bishop to g4. So a lot of craziness, a lot of tactical possibilities that are happening in this game. So you'll see that at the highest level. The game might not look too crazy with the moves they play, but there are a lot of tactics buried in the position that these chess grandmasters have to calculate as they're playing and deciding what variations to go into. All right, so back to the game. Knight to c4 was played. We have this mistake, this pawn push here, which Firouzja follows it up here with this rook move. Moving over here, attacking the unprotected rook. So the best response here is to capture. But now white is ahead here. So after bishop captures with check, the king is forced into the corner. And then we have bishop to c5 because that bishop was under attack. So the bishop moves, controlling this diagonal and preventing the bishop from moving over to here. So white is just slowly putting the pressure on his opponent. And his opponent is kind of, getting a little squeezed, and he's running out of options for his pieces. So queen to d7 is played, and that's the best move. Basically lining up on his opponent's queen in case this bishop moves. And now, let's see here. Bishop retreats, offering a trade. And so the trade is not made. So it looks like this is an inaccuracy, rook to b8, because it just gives up this pawn. Maybe he was thinking once the pawn is captured, he could move at some point and counter this a pawn. But I don't know. Maybe white's opponent cracked under the pressure here. So let's see what should have been played. Queen to c7. So if that was played, what do we have then? Queen to d5 would be the best move. Queen to d5. Centralizing the queen, maybe preparing to bring the rook in behind it. And what does black do if that would have been played? Well, bishop to f5, trying to get this other rook out. Now, it actually wanted bishop to g4, moving it to this unprotected square. Here, you're able to capture this. So let's look at that move. Bishop to g4. So, what happens if you just capture that? Well, then you have rook to d8, and then the queen would have to retreat. And looks like the best thing here would be to ignore that and just pick off that pawn as well. So, if you were to do this, it does give black a little bit of counterplay against your queen there. So if you retreat, this bishop will be picked off here. So we see why that, why the game didn't go in that direction, or what could have happened. So anyway, before I veer off into a bunch of sidelines, so rook to b8 was played here, which just gives up this pawn. So once again, queen to c7 instead of that rook to b8 move. If that is played, then the best thing to do is centralize your queen, okay, to d5, and then what? What if... Oh, you can't move this pawn, or the queen just snatches this rook. Okay, so now we see probably why this rook to b8 move is played, just to cover this pawn right here. Well, hold on. Let me take one more look at this. Queen to c7. Up to d5. You can't develop the bishop, because then this pawn will be snatched up. So what are your other options? Man, yeah, it just looks rough here. White would just have him squeezed in. So anyway, after rook to b8, the pawn is captured attacking the rook. So now the rook has to move back anyway, but it allows this move, knight to b6, forking the queen and the rook. So, capture of white's queen is pretty much forced, but now the other rook jumps into the center of the board. And so after capture here of the bishop, now we have rook to d8, and Abasov with the black pieces just resigns here. So how could the game continue? Well, before we see how it could continue, we see that this knight is pinned to the king, and the bishop is under attack. So both these pieces are forked. If the rook tries to move to come down here and attack the knight, well, then the knight could possibly just capture the bishop up here, and then the knight is still pinned to the king. So it is just not looking good all around here. Now, there's a possibility of trying a back rank mate here. So, rook takes a2 is the second best move. It looks like h5 is the most recommended move, allowing the king to escape here, because there's a threat of just capturing the knight with check, and then the only option would be to block with the bishop, and then the bishop would be captured. So this just looks horrible. That's why this move could be played, or bishop to f8, and then you have this option of capturing the pawn and threatening a mate here. But man, I don't know, that looks terrible as well. So what do? You capture here, but then there would be a capture with check of the knight, and the only option is to block with the bishop. Then you could capture again, and then white could always just make an escape hatch for his king. So, an interesting duel there between 2632 rated Abasov versus 2760 Firouzja, but white overpowered his opponent, and a very interesting win there by Firouzja in round 11 of the Candidates Tournament, which is taking place in Toronto, Canada. So I definitely recommend that you check out these games from the candidates tournament and see what you can learn from the best players in the world battling it out. And the winner of this, there are only 3 rounds left. And after today, there are 3 rounds left. And the winner after 14 rounds will be the challenger for the World Chess Championship against Ding Liren later this year. So, I thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for those that haven't already. Feel free to leave comments, suggestions, or requests if there is any chess video material that you would like to see in the future. And thanks for watching. Have a super chess day.